And I just wanted to quickly welcome two of our new navigators. We have Chloe Nixon joining us from Northern Virginia Community College and Patricia Lang from Clover Park Technical College. Are either of you here?
This is Chloe. I'm here.
Hi, Chloe. Would you like to say anything to the group?
Well, thank you for inviting me to the meeting. I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone has to share. I'm still pretty new in figuring things out, so I appreciate everyone sharing information.
Okay, well, welcome. We're really happy to have you. Is Patricia here? Okay. And I also know we have some guests with us, and Brandy Ferber-Christensen from Pierce College has organized our speakers for today. So Brandy, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to you to introduce our speakers and our topic discussion.
Okay, thank you, Pam. So I'm Brandy Ferber-Christensen. I'm the program navigator for students in our health informatics and medical office assistant programs at Pierce College. The topic for today was strategies for connecting with veterans, and our program has about a quarter of veteran students. So I work with them often, but I didn't know if I was the best person to get that perspective from. So I invited a couple people to join us today. Michael Mesa is on the end here. He is a veteran student, or former student at Pierce College, and is now our manager of access and disability services here. This is Ryan Mitchell. He is a veteran, and he's a current CNU student here, and he is a student employee at our Veterans Center. On our agenda, we also had Jamie, but Steve is out sick today. And Steve Vincent, he's calling in right now. So Steve works with TIAG, he's a veteran, and he works with veteran students.
Hey, Brandy, this is Steve. Thanks. I'm happy to be here. And just FYI, I could hear Pam and Chloe with no problem, crystal clear. Almost sounds like you're talking at the end of a hallway. So I don't know if other people are having trouble hearing you, but I'm having a heck of a time trying to understand exactly what you're saying.
We're having the same problem here. Can you?
Okay. I can call in if that helps.
That might actually help, because I'm thinking as your speakers speak, with the microphone being so far away, it might be really hard to hear.
Okay. So,
sorry, Randy, I don't mean to complicate things. It's just I didn't want you to be saying great things and have people not be able to hear.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and see if we can hear you okay. Maybe you could get started with the first question while I call in. Or Michael said he can be really loud. So our first question was, what information was helpful to you in getting started in higher education? And what information do you wish would have been available to you before you started? Or maybe you could share what you hear often from students. Steve, are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, this is Steve. If someone is speaking to me, are you speaking to me?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, I could tell someone was talking, but I could not understand what they were saying.
Okay, I was hoping that you could share with us what information was helpful to you in getting started in higher education.
Okay, well, thanks. So I kind of come at it from a different perspective. I retired from the Navy after 25 years and had getting 2 master's degrees while I was on active duty. I think that the the approach that I would offer to higher education is that I'm like many other veterans, that you're always continuing to learn. When I transitioned from active duty in 2012 into the civilian workforce, I ended up working in health information technology, which is not what my background would tell you would be a good fit for me. But that was the opportunity that came to me. And so just like I had done all along on active duty, once you've landed in something and you need to know more about it, you go looking for resources. You go looking for what can I learn. And in my case, I didn't necessarily need another degree, but I went looking for credentials and certifications that would help me understand health information technology and allow me to be more effective in the workforce. So I ended up, I became aware of HeW College's program. But I think that the key thing I would try to articulate is I think that many veterans have a key skill where they've learned how to learn. They have been in a lot of education environments in active duty. They have learned the discipline of learning, very focused, very detail-oriented, and I think that they bring a great perspective to higher education. The one suggestion I would make is that I think that it's a new environment many times, and those resource groups, those support groups, that opportunity to reach out to a peer for support for questions is huge. And anytime you can have those programs in place, it's fantastic. And that's what I've got.
Thanks, Steve. Brandy, are you guys still there?
I'm still here. Can anybody hear me? This is Pat from Clover Park.
Hi, Pat. Welcome.
Thank you. I see X's by everybody's headsets.
Okay, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys.
You have the voice on that off.
Hello?
You might have to log out completely.
Hello?
Okay, so we're trying to turn the audio off. I'm not even sure if it's logged in. Hello?
Hello? Hello?
I think you have to do it call in, shut that off, turn that off, like get out of that completely.
Okay. We can't hear anything on here, so. Okay, so I guess you guys can hear us hopefully well enough because I tried to call in and that wasn't working. The next question I'm going to ask of our panel here is how do you broach the topic of a disability with a veteran student and the challenges it presents to the student?
You know, we didn't.
Okay. I think we may have this working now. The next question was, how do you broach the topic of a disability with a veteran student and the challenges it presents to them as
Well, you know, I can answer that question from two different standpoints. The first is, if you're not a veteran, your approach is going to be completely different. I think, you know, with veterans, there is a familiarity that comes from, you know, we've been to the same places, we've experienced a lot of the same things. Therefore, there's a little bit more comfort level to the point where I may feel safer talking with you and accepting some of the guidance that you're going to impart on me. As a civilian or somebody who's never been in the military, it's going to be very difficult to crack that shell. You know, veterans are very private people about their disabilities and their experiences in their own right. And then as a civilian, trying to establish commonality is going to be very difficult. It's going to be something that's going to take a little bit of time. And you can't rush it. You can't, you know, I guess the counseling maneuvers don't really work. You know, we've dealt with counselors, we've dealt with people, and I'm tired of dealing with them. You know, let me come to my own conclusion on when I'm comfortable disclosing it to you, if I ever get comfortable disclosing it to you. The best thing as a civilian working with a veteran that I've found is to speak less and show more when it comes to, you know, resources available, being available, because ultimately a lot of us veterans really take a look at your actions versus your words. You know, if you're working in a school environment, you know, yeah, of course you're supposed to look after you. You don't really care if you don't. But, you know, if you go above and beyond, if you bother to remember my name, if you bother to, you know, say something to the effect of, you know, how are you doing this morning? If you need anything from time, I'll be around here. And give the opportunities for them to connect. I think you'll get a lot further in establishing that relationship and that rapport. And eventually the trust will be built, and you can have a real heart-to-heart conversation and figure out what they need.
Yeah, I would add to that, what Michael said, is that throughout our careers, we've had to talk to people. A lot of civilians, we try to be sympathetic with, oh, I know what you're going through, I've been there, and they haven't. So just listening to them and not trying to sympathize or to find a common ground if you don't have any for their situation, and let them come to you and open up.
Mm-hmm. Think about it this way. It would be the same thing if you had an experience in life and somebody came to you and said, well, I know all about that because I saw it in a movie once. You know, it doesn't really establish a lot of credibility, and in a lot of cases can be counterproductive and push you further than you originally started before you made the statement. The intention was good without doubt, but sometimes it can actually work to the detriment and put you further away from the goal, which was to connect in the first place.
guys. Sean, did you have anything you'd like, excuse me, Steve, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Iraq and Afghanistan is the traumatic brain injury. And many times the challenge is short-term memory. And it's not an obvious injury. It's not an obvious wound, but many times it's manifested in frustration with inability to do some of the things that you would associate with short-term memory. There are some wonderful, wonderful resources that have been developed by the Veterans Administration and DoD that are designed to help with that. And many of them are mobile apps so that it's on the veteran's phone that helps them with some of those strategies. The simple stuff like remembering when your class schedule is so that you show up. It could be as simple as helping somebody set reminders on their phone so you're not embarrassed if you miss class. I know it sounds simple, but for someone with a traumatic brain injury, many of the short-term memory issues are a challenge. There is a guide that I'm going to send to Pam and Brandy to push up, but there's a guide that the Veterans Administration has put together on veterans with TBI returning into the school environment, some of the best practices, tips, and tricks. I'll send that to you. I'll link to that. But I think people tend to focus on the physical disabilities, and those are important. And accommodations need to and can be made. But I think that the key issue many times is the wound that you can't see, and the individuals with a traumatic brain injury, and how do you compensate for that? And the wonderful thing is that many of those mobile apps with the integrated tools provide many of those compensation mechanisms. So I'll send that to Pam and to Brandy, and I'll also send links to a couple of the mobile apps that I'm thinking about.
I think to add on to that, with TBI would be PTSD is another one. The people that suffer from it come from combat arms and dominated jobs in the military. So there's a big stigma around it. They may not even admit it to themselves that they have it. And they, a lot of anxiety is starting in classes, going to classes, being in classes. There's a lot of high activity. So being aware of that, the environment, and trying to help with their anxiety will go a long way too.
And to piggyback that, having both post-traumatic stress disorder and TBI, being in an environment that is in absolutely no way familiar makes it very difficult sometimes to focus, particularly if it's new, to focus on doing things like putting those apps in to remind you to go to class because you're so overwhelmed. And this goes back to the earlier question about connecting with that veteran, is letting them know that, there is a culture, where you are, and really kind of explaining how this is going to work from a standpoint that they can, identify with. You're going to have to use, in some cases, military examples, and say things like, it's just like when you go off the plane and went to reception. We're going to take care of all of those steps right now. So when you go downrange, you can focus on training. Oh, okay, I understand that. I went through that. That's not a painful memory for me. I get it. And sometimes that's enough to get them in the right mindset to take those steps to, put the things in their phones or their iPads without pushback or reservation, and get them excited about moving on to the next step rather than focusing on, oh, wow, I'm a new student, I'm a returning adult student, and I've got PTSD, and I've got a TBI. Right.
Like the app.
Hey, this is Steve. What I would offer, a last comment from me on this, is that what I would offer is, I think that there is a general, so post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury are real challenges that combat veterans face. I think the challenge, that the information that I would want student navigators to take away is that we don't want to be part of the problem. We don't want to feed the stereotype. And the stereotype often is that combat vets are going to have PTSD. It's certainly a possibility. It's certainly a real issue. But PTSD is a common problem in American society. Car crashes, violent crime. 5 to 7 million people a year are diagnosed with PTSD. Well, that's more people than are in the military. So I think that one of the important things is I know what the resources are to help that veteran who may have that challenge. But the other thing is anytime possible, is to speak truth to the stereotype. Not every veteran has it. Lots and lots of people who are not veterans have it. You can't tell by looking at somebody. So it becomes easy to assume that veterans have it, and it becomes a bias. It becomes a reason not to hire. It becomes a reason not to trust, and it's crap. And so I think that collectively the goal is for us to not buy into it. Recognize it's real. Recognize that there are tools that will help, but also it is not unique to combat veterans.
Sorry, you're absolutely correct. I come from the infantry, and so does Michael, so that's kind of where ours comes from. But you're correct. Military sexual trauma is a much higher rate of PTSD in the VA than people who've seen combat. So it's 14% versus 33%. So yeah, you're correct.
Well, and to piggyback that, I mean, you bring up a really good point. One of my biggest frustrations has always been that, when I've had to disclose it, comes that most people are not standing in curiosity as to how to help me. They're standing in a preconceived judgment, like I'm going to snap and reach over and eat somebody's kids. And, that already takes somebody who's uncomfortable and just, builds another wall around it. I think one of the important things that we can do is not only with the veterans themselves that come in, but, the people that are in the support roles, the administrators, the faculty members, even people in the bookstore need to understand that they are a part of that campus culture and how that veteran is feeling when they're walking around campus. They need to be aware of the fact that, yeah, it's real, it happens, and like you said, it's not just veteran related, but, realistically, it's a hidden disability just like diabetes or other, situations, and we just need to deal with the fact that it's there and recognize that people are people are people, and we all need to be treated with respect. And I think that's really one of the bigger issues here is that, everything seems to be focused around the veteran and dealing with the veteran and integrating them with the PTSD, but there's a bigger responsibility for making sure that the environment and the culture is also very aware, educated, rather than quote-unquote just tolerant.
Hey, and Brandy, this is Steve. Again, and what I send you for distribution to you and Pam for distribution is some links to some apps, because one of the great things about the mobile apps that the VA has developed and the DoD has developed, I've worked on some of these for the first 18 months when I left active duty, is that the phones are in people's pockets 24/7. It empowers them with self-care tools. It empowers them with the ability to find to use tools that help them cope, adjust, calm down, etc., memory aids, etc., without being obvious. Because if you see somebody on the phone, you don't know if they're playing, a game, or if they're checking email, or if they're updating their Facebook status. So it's empowering. So sometimes it's just knowing what those resources are and empowering the individual with, here you go, here's access to information, tools, resources. If you need them, great. If you don't, that's fine. Maybe you'll pass them on to another vet or another individual that needs them. But I'll send that to you afterwards.
Part of that is what I was talking about is the culture and the environment and the education of the faculty members, because here on my campus, I've had situations where faculty have just decided, no, there will be no technology in my classroom, because I can't tell if you're farm billing it, Facebooking it, or if you're really taking notes. And that goes back to the culture scenario that, okay, if I run an accommodation for this veteran to use technology, he or she is the only one in the classroom that's using it, now they're singled out, now they feel uncomfortable. So that goes back to the whole scenario of, yeah, we're empowering the veterans, but we also need to make sure that everybody that's in a support role on this campus understands and really, you know, works to accommodate and make sure that everybody's inclusive.
Good point.
So this might go well into our next question, talking about the culture of the school and the environment. How can we best help veteran students find meaning in their educational journey?
I'll take that one. I think I'm currently a student, and working with their advisors and support staff, probably setting short-term goals and long-term goals, because it's hard. I actually got out of the military five years when I worked for 4 years before coming back to work. I went from a significant pay cut into wondering how I'm going to pay my power bill on the GI Bill. So it's easy to actually get out of school. You have to keep that focus on the long term while setting short term goals and having a support network, you know, in place. Because when I get out and I get my AA and my BS, I'm going to make more money than I was before. But it's hard to focus on that. We just had a veteran on the veteran app that same thing. Because it is hard to look at your bank account. A lot of veterans live paycheck to paycheck, and they working on the way to support for their family. And, yeah, it's hard. So I think just working with advisors and support staff, setting up short-term goals and maintaining contact with them, whether it be in like veteran offices with grade checks and calling up to see why one quarter they're getting 3.0s and, you know, they were dropped from all their classes. Maybe, you know, something like that.
I think for me, my situation is a little different. I got out of the Army, 18 years ago. Yeah, you weren't even born, right? And mine was, you know, an injury and you know, certainly was not a planned ETS at all. And the concept of having to go to school for 4 years, I didn't see any value in it. I had no one to talk to, I had no counselor. Fortunately for me, I finally was, you know, stumbled across Chapter 31 and actually met with a both rehab counselor. And that in itself helped me realize that, you know, I'm still a goal-oriented person, and this is a worthy goal. Not so much from the financial standpoint, because I was doing well, you know, self-employed, but more for, you know, keeping that spirit that a lot of the veterans have, of continuously growing, getting better, developing new skills. For me, with the TBI and PTSD, it was doubly important because I felt like I lost a lot of my abilities that I had when I was in the military. So it became a new challenge for me to see that, you know, am I still as good as I once was? So there's a lot of reasons behind it. Some are monetary, some are pride. Some of it, quite honestly, is all about, you know, finding a reason to keep going. I think it really matters. We need to spend the time with that veteran to determine what intrinsic value education has for them, and then work to cultivate that and continue that, like Ryan said, with, you know, short-term goals, benchmarks, and that sort of thing.
We're really working with them, like working the veterans, and if they come in and inform us they're going to drop classes, and they want to withdraw, they don't know what to do because home life is so messed up, and they feel like they have to go back to work. There's programs that don't get talked about, like in our military site, but that they don't know about. And I find it more often than not, I can talk to them, talk about the continuous enrollment online classes at the military bases up here, and really put their fears to rest and help them with finding a balance between their home life, making sure that they get the right amount of credit for their full housing allowance and all that, which I think is important, you know, to have that and to be able to share the knowledge and credit with the veterans and work on them one-on-one. A lot of them like that more than just a group meeting.
Hey, this is Steve. I'll offer two perspectives. One is, I think that for someone coming off of active duty, they're coming from an environment where there's a mission focus. They're focused on the end state. And again, I think to complement what the other gents were saying is that long-term goals, short-term goals, I understand what classes, help me figure out what classes I need to do but to achieve this goal, and why am I getting this credential, this certificate? What's the value in it? What's the purpose? What's this going to do for me? What doors does that open? And I think that's true for any student, and I think the veteran is no different. But I think what is different is the background and the culture they've come from, where there's an end state, a mission focused, that might be a little different than many other students. The other perspective I'll offer to you, and so I'll give you this quick snippet, is that I had been in the Navy for about 18, 19 years before I had the chance to go to the Naval War College. And the greatest thing about the Naval War College was that I was allowed to pick an elective, three quarters, and you had a mandatory course that everybody took, and it was very military focused and very strategy and the stuff you would expect. But each quarter I was allowed to take an elective, and that was so incredibly liberating to have a chance to explore and be creative, because that isn't always the case in a military education. For that individual boot camp, it's very structured. There is no choice in what you're learning. When you're binned into an occupational specialty, there is no deviation from the learning plan. This is what you are going to learn. And when you're given that opportunity to kind of stand in front of a buffet of education and pick and choose, I know that's at odds with the VA plans, where you have to have a very focused plan for what you're going to get reimbursement for. But I think it's very easy to fall into a trap of assuming that what that individual coming out of active duty wants to do is a continuation of what they were doing on active duty. For example, you are a cook in active duty, you want to be a cook in civilian sector. You are a corpsman on active duty, you want to work in the medical field. That assumption, I think, many times it's true, many times it's a logical fit. But it's an opportunity for that individual to have a chance to take a step back, open up the aperture, and say, what else is out there? What else can I do? What's the art of the possible? And I think having, they can't necessarily take all those classes, but having that opportunity to kind of give them a sense of what is out there, what are the other opportunities, and whenever possible, create that opportunity for them to explore in an area and be creative in an area that they might not have had an opportunity to in the past. I know it's challenging to set that up, and I know that there's limits to what you can and can't do with VA funding. But it's just a culture change to be aware of, that coming from a very structured environment where what they learned was told to them. You will learn this because of these reasons. And when you're given an opportunity to take a step back and just kind of start over, that's pretty friggin' cool and scary at the same time.
I agree with that. I think veterans are coming from a different background than, especially the ones that get out recently, than average college students. I mean, most of them have families. Those are the ones that I think have the hardest time finding meaning in their educational journey, because they're used to getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. They're used to that stability, and they go down to getting a paycheck once a month, and they have a family to take care of. So I think that's different than most college-age students don't have to deal with something like that.
I think it also it depends on, like Brian said, the generation of the veteran. A Vietnam veteran that finally is ready to come back to the school is going to be different from somebody from my generation who's the Gulf War versus somebody who's, now Afghanistan. A lot of people seem to think that, the military is the military is the military, but, transitions and cultural shifts within the military produce different things that veterans experience or take with them when they become involved. So, you can't have a universal, design per se when it comes to that. And it's very tricky because, you've got a big melting pot of all of those different generations on one campus. And how do you reach that Vietnam veteran? How do you reach that Gulf War veteran? What do they look like? You look at me and you find out I'm a veteran, you would assume that I'm a veteran of the current war. Well, no, I joined the Army at 17. And I happen to be the same age group as some of the people that are getting out now, but I've been out for longer than they were in. How do you really determine that? And that's one of the biggest challenges. do, to be able to tailor that and say, okay, what options do you have? How do you figure this out?
Okay, so what piece of advice would you share with other students or school employees who might be assisting first-time veteran students?
I think just sit down and really find out what programs and opportunities and needs the school has. I had a hard time this year trying to find what degree I wanted. I felt rushed because when I came in, I felt really rushed. I couldn't find on the website where all the associates are on programs and how they relate to four-year universities and stuff. So I think just really get with the veteran and give them the whole spread of everything the school has to offer, not just for veterans, but I mean everything. You know, tutoring center to, you know, where the best coffee is and stuff. So.
I think for me, the advice that I would give with other students is to kind of piggyback what Steve said earlier, break out of that paradigm that you can only do what you were told. In this particular situation, you know, you're paying for that seat, you're paying for that education, and you, before you spend $20,000 on a car, you're going to go over that thing down to the bolts and everything else. Do the same thing with your education. Figure out the success rate, the pass-through rate. Figure out, you know, what's it going to look like, the transferability to other colleges. Keep digging, employability. Keep digging until you're satisfied that you have the answers. As far as school employees goes, from an ADS, a disability standpoint, don't assume that you know that veteran. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I run across. You know, professors come to me all the time and say, well, my sister's cousin's dog's nephew's cat was in the military, so I know what it's all about. Don't worry about it. And then they wind up inadvertently, you know, flipping a trigger or just flat out offending that veteran. And next thing you know, you've got an incident on campus. Best thing to do is, you know what, treat that veteran like they're a student, because that's what they are. They're a student. They're here to learn. If they need to speak to you or they decide to reach out to you, you know, that's great. That's awesome. You've established trust. But don't label them as, oh, they're a veteran student, so I have to do this. No, they're a student like everybody else. Instruct them, do the best that you can. They're going to do the best that they can, and everything's going to work out in the end.
Hey, this is Steve. What I would offer is help them find a new team. You come from an environment where, you know, it's a very cohesive, team-oriented environment, and now you're in an environment where it's very individualistic. You have to find your new team. And, I mean, so when I left active duty and I'm working for a company and I'm working on-site with a client, I'm still an individual contributor, and it snuck up on me how isolated I felt while I was still around other people. You need to find those connections and those teams that in the past happened logically and naturally, and now you're going to have to create them yourself. You're going to have to find ways to do that. And sometimes I think the veteran needs a little bit of help, whether it is just connecting them with a peer group, whether it's a you know who is a little bit more senior, been around a while longer, and pairing them up so that that person has a veteran student mentor, not someone who's an employee, but someone that you know those other people in the program, you can pair them up with somebody. It's someone they can go to and ask the questions when they don't want to come to the navigator and look stupid. I just think it's finding that way to help them plug into a safe network and start to build a team again.
So we were, that was just coming up over here, having a space for veterans to connect with each other. And we have 3 sites, one of them at JBLM, well, 2 of them are at JBLM actually, out of the 4. I'm lumping them together, but So that lends itself a little more naturally to meeting other veterans. Our Fort Silicon campus has an actual set-aside space as a Veterans Center. However, our space here at Wallace doesn't have the same type of set-aside space for veterans. So that's what we were just discussing is when there is that space available, that allows a different type of connection that is a little more natural rather than forced.
Hey, Brandy, what I would throw out to you is it doesn't have to be a physical space. It can be virtual. And there's an app that comes to mind. Again, I fall back on apps because our people are so tech savvy and mobile. There's an app called PauseRep, and I'm not pushing it, but it's an example of in order to be anybody can download the app, but in order to get an account, you have to provide your DD-214 and prove that you're a vet. Then you're allowed to be in that social network where you can find other veterans who are in your area. It uses your phone's GPS system to find other people that have self-identified as veterans in that area, and you can build a network of people that are perhaps facing similar challenges.
Yeah, the problem that we face is that we do have a vet center at our Lakewood campus, and it's well used. People were in there all the time. I went and visited it, try to get one on the other campus, and it's just the funding, they already fund one, they don't really see the reason to have two. I try to tell the veterans that the same thing. If you have any questions, when I set up their GISO package, so I tell them, if you have any questions, any help, there's 3 work studies there, and I'm more than happy to help walk them places. My supervisor is glad to spend extra time, helping them as a student and as a veteran if they need it in their college experience. So,
what other ways have you found helpful connecting with other veterans students on campus? Would that be helpful to have a staff member connect you to those students?
I think for me, I'm really in a unique spot in that, I get information when somebody self-discloses they have a disability. So I can determine, who's a veteran, who's on using their GI Bill, that sort of thing. But one of the things that I do with staff members in particular is find the ones who aren't comfortable with veterans and network with them to say, okay, listen, let's admit the fact that you're not comfortable with a veteran. I'm very comfortable with a veteran. So if you run across a veteran who is in crisis for whatever reason, tell them to come find me. Let me know. If I'm in the area, introduce me, that sort of thing. So, I've got feelers out there, for the best interest of the student and the veteran. And it also lets the instructor know that there is a resource that is better at dealing with the veteran student than perhaps they are. They're not left with a feeling of inadequacy. And the veterans themselves, kind of like establishing that culture, finding that battle buddy. I may not wind up being that battle buddy, but I understand what they need, and I can actually help navigate them to, link them up with another student or whatever. So it's more of a warm handoff rather than just go here, or we're going to assign you this. It's more of a, hey, welcome into the fold. We're going to look after you. Let's give you what you need. Let's expose you. You're smart. You're here. You can make the decision that's best for you, and we're just going to support you and love on you along the way to help you turn your journey.
All right. So, Steve, was there anything you wanted to add on to that?
No, I think those were some great points. Nothing to add.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much to our panel. I really appreciate your input. And we have just a couple things to finish up then.
Hey, Brandy, absolutely happy to help. I think the other folks had some great points, some great resources. I am a contractor supporting the consortium, so I am available to any of the college staff that has got questions or is having challenges connecting to resources. And like I said, I'm going to send you a couple links that can, you and Pam, a couple links that can be pushed back out. But happy to help in any way I can.
Yeah, if you have not had the opportunity to talk with Steve individually, it was very helpful. He was able to visit us here at Pierce recently, and that was very helpful. So thank you, Steve. Thank you for volunteering for today.
Absolutely, and I apologize. I'm going to have to drop off.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, Pam, did you want me to finish going through the rest of the agenda here? Okay, so the next on the agenda was challenges and best practices. So, was there anyone that would like to share a challenge or best practice that they've used in working with their veteran students? All right, so Adriana shared a best practice is that she recently worked with an intern to create some veteran-specific career resources that she will share with the group so we can use them. So if you could send them to myself and or to Pam, that would be really great, Adriana. Thank you. Would anyone else like to share? I guess I could also share that we've been hosting some veterans events on our campus where students visit from JDLM, students that, or potential students, veterans that are exiting the military service and are interested in a higher education. So we've been able to talk with them individually, talk with them as a group, and I use this panel idea from what we've been doing there. And the students seem most interested in hearing from other students or people who have gone here as a student, and very interested in asking them questions. So that's something that's been really helpful in connecting with those students. Okay, we got a response from Matt. He says, at the college I work at, whoops. The college I work at, sometimes things don't run as smoothly as we'd like, registration issues, etc. Sometimes that can be a challenge for a vet who are used to very clear, regimented processes.
I'll add something to that because I just went through the process. We get a lot of complaints at Veterans Services about that very issue where the first responders of how to register. They come from a background where you're going to be somewhere in this uniform at this time, at this place, doing this. And kind of the registration stuff, some of it's like, go to the school, take a test, sign up for classes, go to class. That's kind of, that's very generic. Like, veterans want to know, what room do I register? When and where do I take the test? What are the times for it? When do I see veteran services? Which sadly, on our registration 5-step program, there's nothing that tells them to go to veteran service. So they don't find out about that until later on. They want to know, well, when do I register? When exactly, what day, right after I take my placement test, before, when should I register? There's a lot of open ground that veterans aren't used to. You know, they come in, they look at the 5 steps, and it looks like they can do it in one day, but they can't. They have to apply to the college, and that takes 48, 72 hours. Then they got to rework their whole life if they have kids, if their wife's working, and they have to watch. I mean, it's very murky, and it can bog you down.
Why can't I go to the PSC and in process today?
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is.
So I think that's a very valid point. You know, the veterans, and I think some of the more probably mature age students like more information versus I think some of the college age students are just coming from high school.
Thank you. That goes well with what Natalie shared. She has a Veteran Safe Place card in all areas served by the grant. She uses key phrases during info sessions that resonate with military folks, but don't put off those who aren't connected to the military to help gain trust. So, Michael had a comment on that as well.
It's interesting. There was Veteran Safe on the Fort Stoughton campus when I was a student there. And that was very good for me for a couple of different reasons. One, when things were fun, I knew that if something got out of hand, there was a safe place for me to go, decompress, possibly, go to class, and that my day wasn't wasted. I wasn't going to go behind. The second part of that was it very clearly identified those people who were either experienced in my area or were sympathetic to what I was going through. So that gave me the feeling that even if they couldn't help me, they would find whatever, was in the best interest if I was emotionally compromised or whatever, to help keep me on track, and also stop me from having that feeling of embarrassment should something go wrong and now I'm feeling like I'm being judged by my peers. So that's a very powerful thing to have in a lot of places. I mean, it's that safety net, but it's also that feeling of acceptance. I personally support it. I tell every veteran that I know, I don't care if you're disabled, if you're a vet, you're in crisis, come find me. And I've had a lot of people who have taken me up on that, so I do know that it works.
So do you want to just explain a little bit about what Veteran Safe is to those who may not have heard of it?
Me or?
Sure.
Oh, okay. And I can't speak for every campus, obviously it's different, but for Fort Stoughton, Veteran Safe meant for any veteran that was having a challenge, the person who had that little placard in their office window was inviting them to knock on the door or whatever and say, hey, I'm in crisis right now, I need a place to decompress, I need to talk to somebody who understands, one of my triggers was stripped and everything in between. And that faculty member or the person who, the administrative member had made the commitment to those veteran students to say, okay, I'm going to stop what I'm doing because you matter to me as a person. Obviously, you matter as a student, but more importantly, as a person that's feeling some challenges. And I'm going to stay with you as long as it takes you to say, get reset, and determine what the next step is. Is it to go home? Is it to see your provider? Is it to sit here for half an hour? Whatever. But they had that extra feeling of stability coming from that member that had that placard in their window. And it was a very powerful tool. Even if those who didn't need it knew it was there. And sometimes that was enough for them to go comfortable with that.
Great, thank you. Patricia shared, it's really important to remember that most of us have not walked a mile in veterans' shoes, so it's important to listen to the needs of the individual and then go to veterans' resources when necessary. I think that goes well with what Ryan mentioned earlier about people trying to find a connection, and if it isn't there, sometimes it can be more detrimental than helpful to compare experiences. So that's something good to remember. Thank you for sharing, Patricia. So the last thing we had here was our round of commitment. So adding one action item that you will be committed to in the next month. So I think for mine, I am going to maybe talk with my group here about what I can do to help connect veteran students.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, medium size. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. It is. It very much is, I think. But it's hard because there's no verbiage in the book, handbook, that deals with the outliers like this. And just shut it up.